Your words matter in an interview, but your words matter when you communicate to another human. Those words that you use every day will translate in an interview. How you deliver your words is way more important than what you say.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
You know, it's Thursday. Here we go. Another solo episode with me, Nick Fialka. I would like to welcome you and tell you you're awesome and appreciate you listening. This is super cool. If you don't mind, could you leave me a quick review? Write something about what you think of the podcast and what kind of value you get out of it. That would be super helpful to me. And now it'll be a little helpful for you. Today, we are talking about speaking with impact. Interviews are nerve-wracking. It can be terrifying to go into the headquarters of this company with these glass windows and these tile floors and these big, huge models of A350s or 777s or Embraer 175s or CRJs or Airbuses or whatever it is. And these fancy schmancy places that are just, look like heaven on earth. And here you go having to walk in, seeing these people in their hustle and bustle and they're walking around and they have the job you want. And you have to go convince them that you're worthwhile. And there's so much at stake and your family is counting on you. And it is terrifying. And what's your job? Your job is to sit there and convince them that you are the person that they should hire to represent their company. Maybe you're at a job conference or a meet and greet. And it's a meet the Chiefs or something like that. And there's so much pressure. What do you say? How do you say it? How do you come off? Oh my gosh, it's so stressful. Everything that you say and how you communicate yourself, that makes all the difference. And I see it all the time. When a person is nervous, they start sweating. Like maybe they're a little anxious, they get a little shaky. Have you ever had that? That's what I do. Like my hands start shaking a little bit and I get that fight or flight response in me and the adrenaline starts going. Maybe you're a person that starts to speak faster and you just want to get it over with. So you speak faster and faster and faster. Slow down. Take a breath. Your words matter, and you have to be in control. When I was working for this consulting company in Washington, D.C., I had to work with a lot of admirals and generals and senior government officials. I had to have meetings with congressmen and do all these things. And so the company sent me to this week-long class all about storytelling. And the whole point of the class was to gain confidence in your ability to communicate. It was probably the most impactful class that I have ever done. I want to tell you a little bit about how it went. So the first thing we did was start talking with one another and identifying what the other person's verbal clutter was. And those things, all sorts of things, that's all examples of verbal clutter. And then once it was identified, they made us stand up and introduce ourselves. And before you began, you had to assume what they called the mountain pose. And the mountain pose, imagine standing with your legs about shoulder width apart, and your arms down and your palms out facing the audience. I want to talk about uncomfortable, right? You're standing like a triangle, and you had to stand and look at the class confidently for 60 seconds. And then you had to talk for 60 seconds. And then the class would go around and critique you about how you presented and what you said. And it was agonizing. Oh my gosh, it was so uncomfortable. It's so stressful because it's like all your warts and all your scars and all the things that you don't like. And they just scrub you clean. And we spent our time sitting there listening to storytellers and talking about how they tell their stories. We learned about being deliberate with what we said and how to speak with impact. It was an entire week of practice. Do you know what my verbal clutter is? You've been listening to this podcast. I have an editing team, but they don't really edit out my verbal clutter. If you pay attention, my verbal clutter is so, I say so a lot. You'll hear me say that. It's super obnoxious, and I try to control that. So and like. Yep. So and like. Those are my three. And I probably have others. If you know what it is, tell me. Tell me what my verbal clutter is if I'm missing out. But let's get back to that class I took. The capstone of the class was to tell a story of the most impactful moment of your life. You had 5 minutes to tell this story. So it had to be succinct, it had to be clear, and it had to be impactful. There were probably, I want to say there were 20 people in the class. And the first person got up and told their story, and it was pretty good. And as we got further and further and further along, people started crying. They had difficulty. They were completely vulnerable in this moment. And it was beautiful. For me, I'll never forget this one. This one woman shared her story, and it was a story about being in Russia doing some work for the company that I was working for. And she got off a bus late at night, and a man came up behind her and hit her in the head with a hammer. And then he raped her and left her on the street to die. And somebody found her, and somebody carried her to a hospital. It was the single most horrific story I've ever heard in my life to that point. And she stood there in that mountain pose and took a deep breath, and she told that story to strangers in such a way that it captured the room. People were sobbing. It was so sad, and I will never forget that. And here's what I've learned from that. Your words matter. Your words matter in an interview, but your words matter when you communicate to another human. Are your words uplifting? Are you giving life with your words, or are you killing? Are you pushing down? Are you holding back? Those words that you use every day will translate in an interview with 3 strangers. How you deliver your words is way more important than what you say. The first thing we should chat about is that you should know that you can overcome whatever verbal clutter you have, but you have to be deliberate. Your brain moves down a track faster than your mouth can travel. And that's the tricky part, right? When this happens, we speed up with our speaking. So slow down. Take a breath. Even in an interview, English is a second language, folks. You can often fall into this trap. Slow down. It is okay to be deliberate, and it's okay to mess up. Slow down. Next, I want to work on capturing your story with impact. That's what we do at Spitfire with our precision coaching sessions, right? It gives you the chance to practice your stories. Now, I didn't say memorize your stories. Definitely do not do that. Practice your stories. Understand your story. Be in touch and give your story depth. I like to talk about practice in sports a lot, right? If you don't work hard on the practice field, you're not going to win the Super Bowl. You'll hear the Spitfire team talk a lot about sports. Sports analogies line up very well with what we do. And it's true, right? I keep coming back to verbal clutter and why it's obnoxious and difficult to understand. And that is because of one reason. Your impact is lost. It's okay to have dead space. It's okay to stop and think about what you are going to say. Did you hear my voice start to mess up there as I said it? That was not on purpose. My brain was there we go. My brain was rolling faster than what my mouth could handle. And so I need to take a break. And it happens to all of us. And that's okay. But work on it because it can be overcome. That dead space, that breath, that pregnant pause, it builds suspense and it brings your audience closer into the story and it brings them to a deeper level. It also helps your brain catch up and allows you to have a little bit of clarity on what you want to say and how you want to deliver it. And that break, that breath, that's how you get rid of that verbal clutter. And man, it's not easy. It drives me crazy when I hear my verbal clutter. And I'll get called out on it all the time, especially because I do this podcast, especially because I'm kind of a public person. And especially since my wife has a background in public speaking coaching, she calls me out, and her friends too. Oh my gosh. But it's okay. The only way I've really found a way to get rid of that verbal clutter is practice and recording myself telling the story. So I record myself on my little voice memo app if I need to tell a story, and then I'll play it back and listen to it. And I will listen for that verbal clutter, and I'll listen to see if I'm speaking too fast or speaking too slow, or if I'm confusing in my story. I'll spend time listening back. That's so important. I also spend time listening to really great storytellers, and I think that's important. You've probably heard me reference TED Talks on my solo episodes. My wife turned me on to the Moth Story Hour, where it is a bunch of people at a bar or in a theater, and they're listening to somebody on stage tell a story. Some are really great, some are not good at all. But the Moth Story Hour is a great way to hear how people speak. I also like listening to Garrison Keillor from Prairie Home Companion, the Tales from Lake Wobegon. His stories are impactful. He talks smooth and slow like molasses, and it's a lovely thing to listen to. It opens up doors when you are a good storyteller. People want to hear what you have to say. Have you ever heard that person that tells a compelling story and they really wrap you in the words that they deliver? It is so amazing. It is such a gift, but it's also practice. And you know what? the people that do this Moth Story Hour, the people that do TED Talks, Garrison Keeler and his team at Prairie Home Companion, guess what? They all practice. They all work hard on honing their craft. Being in front of strangers and being vulnerable is a great way to harness your strength in an impactful, deliberate way when you're speaking. So find the place where you can go and be vulnerable, whether it's on a stage, whether it's in precision coaching, whether it's with your small group and recording yourself answering questions and sending it off to them, whether it's with your spouse or your parents or somebody. Get out there, get in front of people, ask them to listen, take their feedback, write it down, make adjustments, then try again. That's the only way to succeed. And when you speak with impact, you'll get the job because people will want to hear what you have to say. Hey, before you jump out of here and go on to the next podcast, can I ask a big favor? Would you mind going over to your app that you're listening to this podcast on and give me a review? Give me a 5-star review if you love it. Give me a 1-star review if it totally sucks. Put a comment in there, something that is helpful. It helps me. It helps get the word out there. It helps people find the podcast, and that's super cool. If you don't do that, maybe you could just share the podcast with a friend. Tell a buddy who's trying to figure it out, trying to sort out this pilot dream of theirs and get a little bit further. That is super awesome as well. Last, if you don't do either of those two things, how about this? Find a way today to make yourself 1% better. Do that thing that you've been putting off. Put your foot forward, make movement, get yourself going, get that inertia that you need to succeed in this industry. So that's your choice. Leave a review, tell a friend, or make yourself better. Either way, it's all a good choice. And I'm super stoked you're listening, and I will see you on the next episode. The statements made on this show are my own opinions and do not reflect, nor are they under any direction from my employer.